You're listening to the Amplifying Leadership podcast, where we explore what great leadership really looks like through our guest stories, actionable takeaways, and expert conversations. I am Tara Lehman, founder and CEO of Amplifying Leadership, here to help you lead with intention and influence, turning your episodes and guest episodes into actions for you. Today, I am welcoming John Munsell, CEO and owner of Bizzuka. Love the business name, by the way. And welcome to Amplifying Leadership.
Thanks, Tara. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
So I always like our audience to get to know my guests a little bit better. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Golly, man, it's a long story, but I'll go fast.
Okay.
I've spent 17 years in financial services. And then when the web came out, I thought, oh, there's the new frontier. So I ejected and built a company around software development for the web. And then we gradually, it totally different from, being in the banking business. But I always was a bit of a propeller head and a marketing geek. And so we gradually grew into a web design agency and then a digital marketing agency. And then in 2022, the beginning of 2022, I started messing around with some AI tools. And I thought, ooh, there's the new frontier. And my kids had all graduated from college. And so my wife and I were thinking, hey, since we're about to be empty nesters, wouldn't it be nice if we were not tied to 40 employees, but we could compress? So I sold the agency side of the business off and then spent a year working with CEOs thinking I was going to be a fractional CMO. But I was using AI to make up for all the employees that I sold off. And so I found that over the course of the year, they were more interested in how I was using AI than anything else. So I started to teach them the frameworks that I had developed to make things easy for me. And then gradually they convinced me to turn it into courseware. And then Louisiana State University called me up and said, hey, can we take a look at what you're doing? And so I said, sure. And so then they asked me to teach their honors students. And I was like, I am not wired to be professor. So but I said, I think we could have a bigger impact on the workforce if we went through continuing education and went directly to businesses. And so we did that, and it has grown ever since.
And I mean, AI is one of those topics that some people love it or hate it. It can have pros and cons, and we'll dig into that a little bit today for our leaders and business owners out there. It is always out there. You can hear it in the news. You can hear it in conversation. It's there. So I want to start on the good side of things. How is it actually helping leaders do their jobs, or how's it helping organizations keep up with the multiple changes that happen every single day of our lives? What are your thoughts around the good stuff?
Well, the good stuff is really good. So let's take the easy layups off the table. The easy layups are where somebody says, "Oh, let's build an AI application that handles customer service," and it's a big application. It takes a whole lot of time to develop and a whole lot of money, but everybody thinks of that as an AI application. And when you read all the research studies that when they talk about AI adoption and they say 86% of the companies have adopted AI, that's what they're pointing to. A single application that a company is using that has AI embedded in it. And sometimes that could be as simple as they have a Microsoft 365 suite and some people have access to Copilot.
Right.
That's AI adoption. But where it's really helping organizations, and I think this is really where the blind spot is for organizations, is letting their employees use tools like ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, Claude, et cetera, with their own fingertips at their own desktops. And there are ways to make it secure. But when they do that, then things start to rise. But the thing where they're really blind is they're not training those people. And so those people all have to figure it out on their own while they're doing their real jobs. And so you don't see a whole lot of traction when that happens. But if they would just take the time to train all of their people in a uniform manner, using the same methodologies and the same frameworks, Now you have scalable skills developed in the organization. And the impact of that training is phenomenal. We have this thing that we call the 10 levels of AI mastery.
Hmm.
And the higher up you get, the more complicated stuff you're doing. You're building
Right.
tools, you're doing other things. We find that the biggest ROI for companies is when people are operating at level 6 or 7. And at that level, it's still relatively secure. But every level that you go up, you have to increase your governance and you have to increase the
Hmm.
access points that they have. But what happens is the moving somebody from what's typically like a level 2 performance, that's just a slightly above asking it a question, getting a response and going, wow, that's magnificent, right?
Okay. Yeah.
When you're starting to build tools and automate workflows on your own, you're able to reduce your workload by somewhere between 3 and 8 hours a week. Okay,
Nice.
do the math on that. We found that to get to that level, it takes somebody on their own. If they're going to teach themselves, it takes them about 19 to 24 months. In
Hmm.
training, we can get them there in 2 to 6 weeks. Now, think
Right.
about that compression, right?
Hmm.
Now, if I were to take a small company, let's just say a small company with, let's go really small, 10 employees.
Hmm.
If I can give that company 8 hours a week back times 10 employees, that's the equivalent of 2 employees, right?
Hmm.
That's significant.
Yeah.
And that's where people are missing the biggest gains. You multiply that out by a company now that has 100 employees, 1,000 employees. That's a massive difference.
Hmm.
And CEOs kind of sell short too, because most CEOs are master delegators, right? They're the idea people, the creative people, the ones that have the vision, but they rarely do a whole lot anymore with their fingertips. In order to grow, you have to get rid of the things that you used to do and give
Hmm.
that to people. But with AI, the stuff that they can actually do with AI is an extraordinary. We've trained CEOs that have built like we literally last week, one of the CEOs in our program built a tool that blew my mind. But he said it will literally generate them at least another $250,000 in revenue per month.
Wow.
Per
Wow.
month,
Nice.
right?
Wow. Yeah.
So, and it had to do with them digesting these 300-page RFPs that would come in
Yeah. Okay.
for large office buildings, and they would have to sift through that 300-page RFP to figure out what of it applied to them, and then they would have to look
Hmm.
at the specs and decide whether or not they were in the furniture business, and they were like, let me see if that works. He'd said it would take them 3 to 9 hours just to get to a no go or go decision as to whether or not they'd
Hmm.
even want to participate in the RFP. And if
Hmm.
they said, ooh, this is probably worth it, it would take them 2 to 3 weeks plus 2 to 3 people working on it almost full time to develop the response. He built a tool that would get them to a go, no go decision in less than 20 minutes, and it would develop the full response in 2 hours. And so now,
Wow.
look, instead of us basically they would only respond to 3 RFPs a year. He said now they think they can respond to 3 to 5 a month. And each one
Wow.
is somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 worth of business. So that's
Hmm.
phenomenal. And the CEO of a company with 70 employees built it on his own.
Hmm. And
It's amazing.
And I want to talk a little bit about, the culture behind it. I want to come back to what you were saying is that we don't just want to like throw people, hey, go ahead and use it. Giving them some sort of guidance can absolutely save time, especially for smaller businesses, or maybe if you're growing fast. You still need the people you have there, but now you can effectively use them to move things forward rather than always firefighting because you're drowning in 300-page RFPs or
Right,
something like that, right? And so I
right.
think it's really important to point out that AI doesn't necessarily have to replace anybody. It can actually make you a very more efficient, moving forward type organization, right?
Well, in this particular case, and in virtually every case that has come through our training programs, what they've done is they've created excess capacity that they didn't know they had, right? They needed. And so when you create excess capacity, you basically have two choices. You retain it as margin, right? And you because you've reduced costs, or you sell into that capacity and you expand, right?
Yeah.
And so what he did is he realized, wow, we can take on more jobs. And if I train everybody in the organization, we now have the capacity to take on those new jobs. So
Yeah.
that wouldn't have happened without AI. And the other thing is, people are afraid of AI, of course, because if you
Yes, a
read
lot of fear.
yeah, I mean, and it's not unfounded, right? I mean, you think about between AI and robots, yeah, everything we do could be replaced, but I think the one thing that people aren't accounting for is security. So when you look at things like OpenClaw that got released, if you're familiar with it, it's this autonomous agent that people are using. It's so risky that there's no large company that would let that happen. But the bigger risk is that if you let employees dabble around with it themselves and play around with it themselves, and you have no training, they're liable to install that on their computer and then bring their computer to the office and plug it into the network. And you got a 5-alarm fire on your hands that you didn't know that you had. So that's risky. The other is if you don't tell employees what you're trying to do with AI, in the absence of information, they will fill it in with negative thought. Right?
Absolutely. Stories they tell themselves,
Right.
assumptions, right? Right.
Correct. And that's the last thing we want to do. On the other hand, if we train them and we pay to train them, and they know that we're trying to make them better and we're trying to make it so they enjoy their jobs better, now all of a sudden they get excited, especially if you teach them in a manner where when they build their own tools, they get to share it with others and everybody else goes, wow, that's cool. I want to build that too, because it will give them more free time that, like I said, either the company could sell into or they could reward the employee by giving them some time off, right? So I could go to a Dads and Donuts Day. I could go see my kids play soccer. I could do any number of things. And I could even bring my laptop to the soccer field, set it up to do something, shut the laptop basically, and it would be doing stuff while I'm watching, a dance recital or whatever.
Right.
But it gives them that freedom, and that's the good side of AI, right?
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about the risks. I mean, there are risks to AI. I mean, one is, say someone's using an AI app or like say Chat GPT or Grok, whatever, and it goes down. The business folds, something happens. I mean, these things have happened in the past with other companies. If you rely too heavily on it or you don't, have trained employees, you could also have the risk of AI. So what are your thoughts around some of the risks or some of the negatives with AI?
Well, there's a bunch, right? And that's why when I'm looking at using a lot of these tools, right? There's a million tools cropping up every day. The challenge is when you get up into these upper levels that I was talking about, like when you get up to level 8, you're building agents, so to speak, and they have to connect via API to other systems. There's a big risk there. So there needs to be governance in place that oversees that risk. But one of the unspoken risks is what are the tools that you're using to make that connection? And will that tool builder go bankrupt, like you mentioned earlier, right? There's several of them that just go belly up. I mean, how many times has Google themselves built a product, put it out in the wild, had everybody use it, and they go, you know what? We don't want that anymore. And they shut it down. And you're like, I built a whole lot of workflows around that. But there's so many, I'm like, I started our company in 97. And so I lived through the dot-com bomb. And so I watched companies get tons of funding and then collapse. But you could see when you were watching that whole thing, you could say, okay, there's only going to be room for 3 really substantial players here, and the rest I got to watch carefully because I don't want to invest a whole lot of time in those tools. And I think the same thing is true here, except for instead of, I think there'll be a lot more failures. Okay. And they'll be a lot quicker. So I wouldn't invest in anybody that doesn't have at least a Series A, probably a Series B round of funding. I don't know that I would spend a whole lot of time playing with their tool. I think there's too much risk in somebody like Google through their Gemini suite, or OpenAI through the ChatGPT suite, or Claude through or Anthropic through other Claude tools. I think there's too much risk in them just adding those things to theirs, to where the individual or independent developer is going to be irrelevant, you know?
Yeah.
So I would be really careful about the tools that I choose, not just for how long they'll work, but how long they'll stay in business. And so I think in this stage where things are taking off like a rocket, I would only bank on OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google. Those would be the top three that I think I would feel safe with. Microsoft is finally coming around a little bit better, but Microsoft's licensing is such a nightmare. It's really hard to figure out what you have to bolt on to get the equivalent of these other tools out of it. So, but that would be my thing, is stick with those. They're going to end up adding new features in there that equal a lot of what you're seeing out there. The vibe coding tools are getting kind of interesting. That's another one where there's going to be some major fallout to be watching for. But it's crazy.
I mean, it's a great tool, but there are risks, which is, why I wanted to bring that up as well.
Yeah.
I now want to kind of flip to the employee side of things. So my company's bringing in AI, and of course my fears go up, because we've seen some of the news out there, that such and such a company is getting rid of 1,000 people because AI is going to take over. And the fears can creep into the employees who hear that the organization's bringing in an AI tool or something for them, right? How do we put that fear to rest? How do we help them understand this is a good thing?
I don't know that you can completely put it to rest, because I was just talking to a friend of mine whose daughter has now been laid off, rehired, and laid off again from the same company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she's in sales. I'm like, tell her to call me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is, if you invest in your employees and you understand that I think this whole mantra of you won't be replaced by AI, you'll be replaced by somebody who knows AI. I think that's a load of junk, because to any employer worth their salt, they know that their existing employees are they're far more valuable than a brand new one who has to learn their culture, learn the processes, learn all of that stuff all over again. I don't care whether they know AI or not. But if you just spend 3 to 6 weeks training a current and loyal employee how to use AI, you'll get 10x results. But if you replace them, it's going to cost you 7x more to replace them. And then you'll be lucky if 12 months they're really up to speed. But as far as the employee fear goes, I think if you train them and you put them through a legitimate program, they're going to feel valued, and they'll also produce things that make them feel like they're contributing. And that's more important than salary to people, is contribution, recognition, camaraderie. All of these things are important. So I think if you create an environment and a culture of trust, then I think you can mitigate the fear. But you have to address the fact that this is way more than just a technology change. This is a change management problem, right? This is an inertia issue. So we have to address that part of it. And I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can quell fears without addressing it head on, and then helping people see how much fun it is to actually use, but make sure they use it safely, right?
And I think you said a couple of key things there, like people need to feel valued. people like to be trained because that means that they are gaining a skill that they could take somewhere else if needed, if something happens to your organization. I
Correct.
think all of these things really do help employees. And the other thing I want to mention is that what is the purpose of this? I mean, the why or why not of something is so important to people. We love the answers to that. So why are we using this app? And then what's going to happen to me? Have those answers ready, I think is really key for employees so that that
Sure.
fear starts to come down, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether you're familiar with a book called Corporate Life Cycles by a guy named Ichak Adizes, Adizes. In it, he teaches you essentially the chemistry of your team as you increase and grow to the point where you start to decline. All right, and it's a we all have these various mixes, right? There's the producer, the person who just
Hmm.
loves to do the work. There's the administrator, the one who loves to put rules and structure around the work, right? There's the entrepreneur, that's the idea person, the creative visionary who loves to see new relationships that others don't see and take risks and move forward. And then there's the integrator, the one that loves to build teamwork and camaraderie and culture, right? So you have a little bit of everything in you. But some
Hmm.
people are dominant in some areas. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm a heavy idea guy. I'm a massive ADD clown, right? But my daughter is a producer, and she loves just give me the work, show me what to do. And I got another gal who's a massive administrator. She loves to put the rules and structure around it. But if you think about what AI largely replaces P and A work, producer and administrator work, but it
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily replicate entrepreneurial or innovative work without you
Yeah.
pushing it. And it
Yeah.
certainly can't create teamwork or culture or anything else. So you need those people. But if I am an administrator, but in somewhere hidden in me is that innovator, right? That idea
Hmm.
person or that culture person. The more I get AI to take off from my plate, the producer and administrator stuff, the more I have time now to explore my creative talents and the parts
Hmm.
that only humans can bring to the table. And I think that the thing that is missing from most training programs, and we're embedding it into ours, is this idea of we need to teach people how to think differently, right? We can't just simply
Yeah.
replace the same workflows and just throw AI at that workflow. The workflow has to change. Everything has to
Yeah.
change. And we
Hmm.
also have a tendency as humans, I think, to become, first of all, brainwashed by the fact that they say artificial intelligence is going to be, smarter than any human, all humans combined. That's fair, but I think it's really more about saying it's faster, and
Hmm.
it will have the collective intelligence of the entire universe in that little box. But at the same time, there's so many parts about being human that it will never have,
Yes.
and I think we have a tendency to abdicate our thought processes to this machine, and I think that's dangerous. And so we have to teach people, look, just because ChatGPT can drive massive amount of volume of text and make some really interesting decisions and recommendations based on these new learning and research models and reasoning models that are out, it doesn't mean that it's right. You know, it means that
Yeah.
it's gotten you to a point where you get to decide, you can discern, you need to use your critical thinking skills and say, is this what excellence looks like? Or do I need to push it farther? Right. And that's, you
Hmm.
need to know how to have that kind of a relationship with the machine, so to speak. And that's what
Hmm.
I want to make sure that we teach people, because I don't want them to just go, oh, it's smarter than me. And they give up being who they are. Right. They
Yeah.
bring
And
too
I
much.
mean, let's be honest too, sometimes it's wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
so, you have to use the critical thinking
Yeah.
anyways, right? Because sometimes it's not correct. Um,
No.
I want to give you a minute or two as we wrap up here. What is the future of AI? What do you think it is for businesses out there?
Yeah. How far out you want to go?
Yeah.
That's the question. I'm glad you brought that up because we had our quarterly planning session on Monday, and I distributed to the team today our 3-year vision and where we need to go as a company. Because I'm confident that what we're doing today will highly likely be irrelevant 12 months from now.
Hmm.
So we have to be constantly looking for where is the puck going to be rather than where it is right now. And so that's what we have outlined. Now, where I think it's going, I think that security is going to slow adoption down because the agentic side of AI, which is what this year supposedly is all about, the age of the agent. First of all, everybody's saying, "Oh, you got to learn how to build an agent. You got to learn how to build an agent." I think you need to learn the other incremental steps to get there first. If you just go from level 1 thinking to level 8 implementation, you're missing all the steps. And so what
Hmm.
you build is going to be a colossal mess and a giant risk. So we need to make sure that we make everybody go through the incremental training so that we know what we're actually producing. I think the technology is moving far faster than security can keep up with it. And
I
they're
bet.
yeah, I mean, if they're telling you that an algorithm that they thought, an encryption algorithm they thought would take 20,000 years before we could crack, could pretty soon be cracked in 20 minutes, we have a major problem, a major
Hmm.
problem. So I think that security is going to put some air brakes on a lot of this stuff, and it'll give us a lot more time. And I think that that will it can't prevent you from diving in right now head first. You have to,
Hmm.
but you have to know when to pump the brakes. But you could get to that level really quickly, and the impact is going to be dramatic. But I feel like a lot of jobs will be replaced. But I think if we have enough time and then I think that we can figure out, okay, how do we shift? I mean, it's a massive paradigm shift. How do we
Oh,
shift as you,
yes.
right? And people, how do
Hmm.
we shift? Shoot, just like we're working a lot with higher ed, and we're sitting here thinking the way you're teaching now has to go away. Because
Hmm.
if the world's
Yeah.
knowledge is instantly available and it's almost free, then what do we have to teach kids? We don't necessarily have to teach the acquisition of knowledge as much as we need to teach them what to do with the knowledge. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
that's
Good
where
point.
things are shifting, you know?
Yeah. And I think we'll see that in education going forward. They have to catch up, but you're right, because
Yeah.
AI is like so fast, too fast in some
Yeah. Yeah.
cases, right? It's really hard to adopt to. I want to thank you for such a wonderful conversation. AI is something that scares a lot of organizations or that a lot of organizations embrace wholly. And I think it's a good timing for this conversation as well. I want to make sure the audience knows how to get a hold of you if they're looking for your training or any resources that you might have available. Is there somewhere they should do that?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. So our website is bizzuka.com, bizzuka.com. And I also wrote a book called Ingrain AI, and it teaches a business how, not why, but literally
Hmm.
how to scale AI in their organization and how
Oh,
to
excellent.
distribute it and create governance and all that stuff. But you can get that book on Amazon. It's Ingrain
Excellent.
AI, or you can go to ingrain.ai and learn more about it there. And we also, I don't know whether you're up for this, Tara, but we
Hmm.
have for businesses that are looking to scale and want to know what would the economic impact be if we actually train people. We have an analysis we call an AI impact analysis, and
Oh, okay.
we charge $177 for that. But if if your listeners will use the coupon code amplify, since that's your gig, right, then
Yeah.
we'll give it to them for free. We'll literally
Oh,
drop
excellent.
100% off, and you can get that at ingrain.ai/impact,
Excellent.
because it's an impact report, right? But just ingrain.ai/impact and use that coupon code amplify. That way I'll know it came from you, and we'll give them 100% off of that report.
Greatly appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of people do as well. Yeah, definitely, audience, listen to that one. I mean, if this is something you want to see, then check it out for sure. We'll put that website and code also in the show notes. Okay. Thank you so
Well,
much
thanks,
for
Tara.
the
It's great
tips and
meeting you.
information today. Yes, you
Hey, I
too, John.
appreciate
Thank
being
you.
on.
Of course, we thank our listeners today. We hope you gained some valuable insights and practical takeaways about AI from John today. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a great rating or review. It's one of the best ways to support the podcast, but also help us and our guests like John reach more leaders and business owners with these meaningful stories, tips, and of course, advice. If you are looking to clarify leadership priorities, build stronger teams, and empower those around you, I'm here to help. Explore our solutions, offers, resources, and the Amplifying Leadership community at amplifyingleadership.ca, because leadership is better when we do it together. Until next time, remember, leadership matters.